For Sunday Today, Cassandra Clayton, Sunnyvale, California.
Abortion, an emotional, divisive issue in this campaign. We'll have more on social problems, and Connie Chung will be here with her report on the campaign in defense after these messages as Sunday Today.
It's the statement you make as you travel through life, distinctive, decidedly you. The great American road belongs to Buick. It's the fast lane of life, the road to the top, the road that Buick commands. The great American road belongs to Buick. Substantial and sure, with power and grace, a spirit as free as your own. Yeah, it's the freedom to climb just as high as you choose on a road that was made just for you. Oh, the great American road, the great American road belongs to Buick. The great American road belongs to Buick. The great American.
Circuit City has so many wonderful electronic things all under one roof, it's hard not to get distracted.
I'm here to buy a calculator, and that's all. No browsing, no touching.
Circuit City can really test your self-control.
Very nice. But it's not a calculator. It's not a calculator.
The most up-to-date selection of brand names, all at Circuit City's guaranteed low prices.
So how could I resist?
Circuit City, the intelligent choice.
Did you pay any income tax last year? If you did, then you paid more than General Motors, even though they made over $2 billion. You also paid more than millionaires who use fancy tax loopholes. I want to go to the Senate to close those loopholes. Pete Wilson doesn't agree. He voted to make middle-class families pay more taxes so that people making over $200,000 a year could pay less. The corporations and millionaires are supporting Pete Wilson. I need your support.
Despite the campaign rhetoric on issues like crime and defense, the candidates have not always hewed to the traditional conservative versus liberal line. But on social issues, many of which are in a crisis state, George Bush is taking the traditional conservative Republican line, and Michael Dukakis offers the liberal Democratic panacea of more help by the government. Keith Morrison reports.
Pray to God as you go to vote this election year, you do not have an accident in downtown Los Angeles.
What do we got, gentlemen?
Or Chicago.
I don't think we have a bed.
Or Miami.
O negative blood 4 units. Now.
Or any of dozens of cities in this health-conscious country. This nation's ability to deal with trauma is in crisis. This Los Angeles emergency room threatens to close. Many others already have. All around America, whole hospitals have been shutting down. Robert Blendon of the Harvard University School of Public Health is blunt.
It's one of the few things which actually have gotten worse for Americans since 1980. 25% more Americans now walk around without any health insurance. And when they're sick, there are less hospitals willing to have them walk through the door and be seen.
The health system is under stress because costs have risen at twice the rate of inflation, because health insurance costs 20% more this year alone, because 37 million Americans, mostly the working poor, no longer have access to any insurance at all, private or government. Listen to Dr. Ann Turner, who works with the poor in South Central Los Angeles.
Patients have limited access to care. They don't have health insurance, they can't afford it. They basically don't go to the doctor until they absolutely have to. So frequently their children don't get immunized, women don't get early prenatal care. Illnesses that are relatively easily controlled so that people can live a pretty normal life are simply untreated here in South Central.
It can hardly be said the campaign has charged into the quagmire of health care, but Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis has made some promises. Dukakis would give the rest of the nation his plan for Massachusetts. Businesses would be required to provide basic health insurance for workers, and the Democrats, he says, would close the gap into which those 37 million uninsured have fallen.
We're going to challenge every sector of our society, business and labor and government and the medical professions, to find a way to provide a basic level of coverage for those Americans who can't be insured through the workplace.
George Bush offers less, but at less cost, too.
One thing I will not do is sock every business in the country and thus throw some people out of work. I want to keep this economic recovery going. More Americans at work today than at any time in history, a greater percentage of the workforce. What I will do is permit people to buy into Medicaid. I believe that's the answer.
Ask health professionals and ask the poor, and they will tell you that is not enough, nowhere near enough to give all Americans quality medical care. But that care promised by Dukakis would not come cheap. Curing the system, healing the poor, would cost billions.
In a campaign that has shed far more heat than light, social issues have largely been ignored. For example, a year ago, AIDS was on front pages everywhere, but in the election, ignored. A year ago, the homeless were on magazine covers, but in the campaign, barely a word. All of these issues, the healthcare crisis included, have run under the surface of the campaign. And it's too bad because, on all of them, the candidates have profoundly different visions. And education is no exception. Last week, these students in a predominantly white upper-middle-class suburb held a mock election and vindicated the Republican record.
Bush is 58%.
But in poorer cities and schools, as many as 2/3 of teenagers fail to finish high school, only dream of college. And again, Dukakis promises government action, offering federal programs such as low-cost student loans, which could be paid out over a lifetime, promising to cure illiteracy, saying financial status should be no barrier to advanced education.
No young person in this country who completes high school, who is qualified to do college work and is admitted to college, ever should be denied that opportunity because of financial need.
Bush also promises to be an education president, also has a long list of objectives to improve schools and colleges, but stops short of large infusions of federal money. Where Dukakis offers new long-term loans, Bush suggests tax incentives to help people save and pay their own way. Both want to improve education, but it's clear they approach the issue from different ends of the spectrum. Here's Bush with working-class students in Los Angeles.
But intellectual achievement isn't the only gauge of success in life, not by a long shot. And first off, some of you won't be going to college because it's not right for you right now. Or you're choosing a career that doesn't require a college degree. And that's fine, too. And I hope we remember in this country that even though we emphasize the value of higher learning, you don't have to go to college to be a success. We need those people who build the buildings, who send them soaring into the sky. We need the people who run the offices and the people who do the hard physical work in our society.
The style of this long campaign may have served to confuse or obscure.
You'll take on all opponents, a landslide will be seen.
Nevertheless, on the social issues, the choices are clear. Traditional Democrat versus Reagan Republican. Liberal versus conservative. And the result will have a profound impact on the way we live and learn in America. Keith Morrison for Sunday Today in Los Angeles.
Whoever wins, it will take a lot of money to solve these problems. And we'll be back in just a moment.
Norelco's new coffee makers do more than make coffee. They bring out the best in your coffee. All new coffee makers with System 190. Balancing time, pressure, and just the right temperature to bring out all the aroma and richness you look for in every cup. Norelco coffee makers bring out the best in your coffee.
Now, what about the Stanton judgment? Tough case?
We won it.
Nice work.
I had a great team.
Bet you she gets a great raise, too. Our next junior partner should be getting some good financial counsel. Call my Prudential broker.
Rock solid.
At Prudential Bates, rock solid means an all-star team behind you, armed with the strength and resources to win.
So, Big Gun make you a partner yet?
Bang.
Prudential Bates Securities, rock solid, market-wise.
Bring it back what we had in the first place. Bring it back. Bring back safety in the workplace. Is it too much to ask? Safety in the workplace. Let's bring it back. Bring back safety in the workplace.
50 years ago, the legendary radio broadcast by Orson Welles made this little town the target of an alien invasion. Now, it's about to happen again.
They're here.
The invaders are back for the doomsday weapon they left behind.
Our mission is to kill the primitive.
Terror comes home to the town where it all began. And this time, the nightmare is real on War of the Worlds.
Today at 4 on Channel 3.
Defense often becomes a political football in a presidential campaign, and it has in this one, too. George Bush charging that Michael Dukakis would weaken America's military strength. Dukakis saying that we are spending billions of military dollars in the wrong way. Well, Connie Chung is here this morning to talk about that. Good morning, Connie.
Good morning, Garrick, Maria. You know, Garrick, when we sat down to look at Bush and Dukakis' positions on national security and defense, we discovered that both candidates are off the mark. This is a report of 10 extensive surveys taken from last fall to now, conducted by Americans Talk Security. These are surveys on voter attitudes on national security. And the headline is, Americans no longer see the Soviets as the biggest threat to our national security. Majorities of Americans think the most grave national security threats are international drug trafficking and economic competition. They're worried about countries such as Japan and West Germany buying our banks and buildings and land inch by inch, not the communists and their tanks and missiles and guns. And the startling fact is that these polls were conducted by the candidates' own pollsters, and yet the candidates haven't addressed these concerns in terms of national security.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Neither candidate wants to be accused of being weak on national defense, so they do what they think they have to do to make the point. Do what Reagan did. He won twice pressing the defense issue. The centerpiece of Reagan's military buildup was weaponry, military hardware. And that's exactly what Bush and Dukakis have been talking about, military hardware. But there's a basic difference between the two.
My opponent, for example, emphasizes conventional defenses while he is viscerally uncomfortable with anything related to the nuclear arsenal. But the truth is that conventional defense alone cannot do the job of deterring war.
Bush supports a big bang, big buck policy. He emphasizes strategic nuclear weapons, the big hardware to confront the Soviet Union. Beef up land-based missiles, either a rail-based MX or a smaller ICBM, the Midget Man.
The fact of the matter is that we have a massive, survivable nuclear deterrent right now, 12,000 strategic nuclear warheads. What we don't have is the kind of strong conventional defense capability we must have, and that is going to be my top defense priority as President of the United States.
Dukakis de-emphasizes strategic weapons. He puts his strongest priority on improving conventional forces, more research in anti-tank warfare, and more tanks and armored personnel carriers. Reduce money for Star Wars. No to the MX and Midget Man. But both candidates are ducking the real issue, how to pay for all that military hardware with a shrinking defense budget. Gordon Adams, director of the Defense Budget Project, a nonpartisan research organization.
The problem that you have is kind of 6 lanes of military hardware heading straight into 4 lanes worth of budget. You can't squeeze it all into the 4 lanes of budget. You're going to have a traffic jam. In the traffic jam, some things have got to get off the road.
promising too much?
I think both Bush and Dukakis have a problem of not knowing exactly where to make choices. Both of them have basically been saying over the length of the campaign, it is possible to have everything in defense. And both, regardless of who comes into the presidency of the United States on January 20th, that person is going to face a major problem of choice making in the defense budget.
So what you're saying is both Bush and Dukakis are going into this with promises, and won't be able to deliver.
The key to an electoral campaign around defense is that you don't ever want to say what you're against, you want to say what you're for. If you say what you're against, you always leave yourself vulnerable to the accusation that you're not for a strong American defense. Well, we've now reached the crunch. We've now reached a point where the resources aren't going to grow, but the plans are still growing. So our appetite's a little bit bigger than our stomach in defense right now, and we've got to find a way to match the two so we don't get a bad case of military indigestion.
I believe in SDI. I will build a strategic defense system as it becomes feasible, and I will make America safer.
I'm for the stealth, I'm for the D-5, I'm for going ahead with the advanced cruise missile.
Ironically, all those promises may not be what the voters want to hear. According to surveys conducted by Bush and Dukakis' own pollsters, Americans are no longer as worried about American military might as they were 8 years ago, thanks in part to the Reagan military buildup.
I think I could sum it up by saying that people feel we've been getting stronger militarily and weaker economically.
Daniel Yankelovich, public opinion analyst, who also participated in the surveys.
Our surveys show that the nuclear threat has diminished. There is much less concern that the Soviet Union might start a nuclear accident. And on the other hand, they're increasingly nervous about the possibility of an economic threat. That sense that other countries are competing with us and winning the competition is making people very nervous about the future of the economy and therefore the future of national security.
Would you say that Bush and Dukakis are taking a very narrow view of national defense?
They are taking a very narrow view. So you really never get a picture of what the national security concerns of the public are. You just get a picture of skirmishing under a blanket in the dark. So you could not deduce from this campaign what the national security concerns of the American public are. You just have to look at it. I mean, you look at our surveys and you look at the campaign, and it's two different worlds.
The surveys show that Americans are looking for a president who will help strengthen the economy or address the nation's social problems, rather than one who will guarantee a strong national defense. Jerry?
We live in an age now we realize that defense spending has to have a top put on it, a ceiling put on it. Has there ever been a president who's been able to limit defense spending and get away with it politically?
Absolutely. Eisenhower. He was the military man, and people believed him. When he said, beware of the military-industrial complex, he understood it, and they believed exactly what he was going to do. And you know what? I asked Gordon Adams, I interviewed him, is there anyone in this campaign or in the past year who could have articulated the same themes of cutting defense and people would have believed him? What? You know, he said the obvious one, Georgia Senator Sam Nunn, chairman of the Armed Services Committee.
Connie Chung, thank you very much for your report on defense and the true meaning of national security. We're going to move on to the news. The NBC News Wall Street Journal final poll is out this morning, and here are the results. It shows that Democrat Michael Dukakis is closing in on George Bush. With 3 days to go, the Bush lead has narrowed to just 5 points. Almost 1 in 10 of those questioned is still undecided. Today, the presidential candidates are out west. Both begin the day in the state of Colorado. Dukakis then moves into Oregon, Washington State, and California, while Bush will be making 2 stops scheduled in California, the state with the most electoral votes, 47 there. In Illinois last night, Bush and his wife were on the streets of Chillicothe, and the vice president spoke as though he's not at all that confident about his lead in the polls.
I'm going to keep running like we're 10 points back. I am not going to let the liberal governor of Massachusetts catch me.
Dukakis attended a South Texas rally with his wife, Kitty, last night. There, the Democratic candidate denounced Republican campaign ads that he says are designed to scare off Hispanic voters. The ads threatened ineligible voters with fines, jail, and a loss of citizenship. That's the political news this morning. Al Roper's with us again.
That's right, and we've got the Election Day forecast for you. And right now, here's what it looks like. We expect to see some showers in the northeast, but nothing too terrible. Heavier precipitation with some snow in the northwest, sunny and clear around much of the rest of the country. So it looks like weather will not be a factor. And here's what's going on in your neck of the woods this morning. We expect to have snow in Chicago and 35 degrees, Denver 70 and sunny, Washington partly sunny skies, and a temperature of 62 degrees. And that's the latest weather. Garrick and Maria?
Hot campaign.
Hot campaign. More to come. Thank you, Al. We'll have more on our look at the election and national decision time as we continue here this morning on Sunday Today. Stay with us.
GE is a family of many different kinds of people, and while it may not look like it, they all have the same job, bringing good things to life.
We are the spark in the engine, the switch in the night, a voice in the dark, from a million miles away. We are the beats and the splash, the glitch and the flash. We are GE, we are the good things you hear and see. We are GE, we are the sound of surprise, and the whisper in the sky. We are GE, that's what we'll always be. We are the good things, we are GE, we bring good things to life.
Tough Shed says,
if you think a tin shed can hold up like a tough shed, you're in for a big surprise.
Tough Shed has got you covered for winter with many sizes and many colors. Quality construction, 4x4 treated runners. No need for concrete. Big door with steel door latch and hinges. 8x12, just $6.99 delivered. Tough Shed. Quality, fair prices, and they're tough. 3202 Orange Grove Avenue. Call 1-800-234-TOUGH. That's 1-800-234-TOUGH. Call today.
2 years ago, I was reporting on a hidden cancer that kills more than 60,000 Americans every year. In learning about the warning signs of this cancer, I found out that I had a tumor. Luckily, it was benign, but the series probably saved my life. Early detection and proper diet can lead to a cure for colorectal cancer. Find out the facts that could save your life. The Curable Cancer, starting Monday when Channel 3 reports at 5.
A lot of funny things happen on the way to the White House. Join Tom Brokaw for a different look at Campaign 88. Is this any way to elect a president? Tonight.
I'm Bryant Gumbel. This week on Today, the 88 race in the home stretch.
I'm Jane Pauley. After America Votes, we'll talk with the winner and look ahead.
Join us this week on Today.
Well, believe it or not, the long election campaign is drawing to a close, and with it, one of the most intensive examinations of the electorate ever. For more than a year now, we've dissected and probed the attitudes, concerns, and feelings of the typical American voter. What is left is something of a composite of what we as a nation are thinking, not just about whom we prefer as president, but what's on our minds. As always, topping the list, in a word, our pocketbooks.
The American electorate is concerned about the traditional economic issues like jobs, inflation, unemployment.
Doug Schoen of Penn & Schoen conducts polls for both parties.
But they don't have the same burning intensity that they'd had in earlier elections.
That was clear by the polls that told us what we were thinking. When Gallup asked what are the most important problems facing this country today, the answers were consistently economic. 45% put the deficit, the economy, or unemployment at the top. But when asked by Time magazine Yankelovich how things are going, 73% thought very well.
You fight about furloughs, you fight about Boston Harbor, you fight about raising taxes in Massachusetts or General Noriega because we don't have any overreaching issues like Vietnam or 10.1% unemployment or double-digit inflation. Basically, things are pretty good in this country.
The NBC Wall Street Journal polls seem to bear that out. 77% of voters feel that they're being treated fairly by American society. But the majority also feel that the poor and the elderly are not getting a fair shake in this country. What else have we learned about ourselves as we probe the issues? As we heard earlier, Gallup discovered that 70% of Americans favored the death penalty for convicted murderers. 22% were opposed.
Our bodies, our lives, our right to decide.
Gallup also found that the majority of people favored a woman's right to an abortion under certain circumstances. Drugs have been a major campaign issue, and this may be a reason why. By margins of 3 and 4 to 1, voters won a massive multi-billion-dollar program to combat illegal drug use. The majority also say that they're willing to pay for those programs with a special 5% tax increase on their federal taxes. What do we think the future holds? Just over half of Americans expect to be better off financially than they are today. But roughly 1 in 5 expect the national economy to worsen. So while most Americans are optimistic about their future, they are negative when it comes to their choices about the person they want to lead this country into that future. 57% of likely voters wish they had another option in this presidential race. Perhaps that's one of the reasons that the voter turnout is expected to be very low.
A lot of people criticize polls because they say it takes away a lot of the drama or may influence people's opinions, and yet a poll like that is very important because it shows you what people actually do think, and it's important for us and important for the candidates, too.
Yeah, and make no joke about that, because the candidates look at these polls and they use them to kind of figure out what they want to target, what issues they want to talk about in the fall campaign.
And it means that they really cannot avoid it. If people are concerned about the environment, we've seen that issue come up this fall, they have to address the environment. We've seen George Bush tackle that, something he might not have done a few months ago.
And we will, of course, be talking a lot more about the election as it winds down. John Chancellor, Ken Bodie, and Tom Pettit will be here.
Criminals be warned. You can run, but you can't hide from unsolved mysteries. Wednesday on NBC.
Remember to vote on Election Day.
It's time for a change. See the difference. Maida's Toyota of Sacramento has joined the other fine Sacramento dealerships bearing the Maida name. At Maida's, no reasonable offer will be refused. The over 40 1989 Camrys for as low as $10,999 or $149 per month. See the difference at the all-new Maida's Toyota of Sacramento.
On the next USA Today, feeling overworked and underpaid?
I feel I need a raise every single day.
But the boss just doesn't understand?
Personal problems. Yes, I've always wondered what they must be like.
We'll give you advice and strategies that will help you get that raise. Prince Charles is turning 40, and his infatuation with Diana may be fading. Yet America's love affair with the royals is still going strong. On the next USA Today.
Monday at 7 on KCRA.
Well, it's just 2 days to go now until Election Day, and the latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll has been concluded. As we've been reporting this morning, we want to give you some of those figures again. It shows George Bush with the lead, 48% to 43% over Michael Dukakis. That's a bit narrower than it was just a couple of weeks ago. But look at the 9%. That's still a significant percentage of undecided voters in this country, and that could still be an important factor come Election Day. And we want to talk about that now with our roundtable. John Chancellor is joining us today, NBC News commentator. Tom Pettit, who's been covering, or Ken Bodie, first of all, who's our national political correspondent, and Tom Pettit.
Well, look at that new poll. Are we talking about a possible dead heat?
Oh, I don't think so, but you could mathematically say it. It's got an error factor of plus or minus 3. That could bring it in very close if we were wrong on, on everything. I don't think we are wrong on everything. I think you see something that's likely to happen on Tuesday in that poll.
We have to distinguish between electoral vote and popular vote.
Well, that's popular vote, yeah.
Well, what's changed? I mean, we were talking about a possible landslide a couple of weeks ago. Does Dukakis, is he finally catching on?
Who knows if anything's changed, but I want to remind you, I was in Chicago this weekend for the Torchlight Parade, the big traditional Democratic tribal rite at the end of the campaign, and listened to John Kennedy's speech in 1960 and Michael Dukakis' speech. Kennedy on film, of course, and Dukakis. Dukakis reminded the voters of Illinois that Kennedy went into, and Johnson went into that last weekend 8 points behind in the national polls. This is closer than that, or it's about the same, I guess, as that.
Tom, you've been across the country. What's your feeling?
Well, my feeling is that Michael Dukakis has finally figured out how to play Jimmy Cagney. He's coming on as a fighter, the champion of the underdog. He doesn't have quite the nuances that Cagney had in his delivery, but he has made the underdog fighting for the underclass a major theme now in his campaign, and that's what's brought it closer.
But the question has got to be, why did it take him so long?
Well, that was inefficiency. He ran a very bad campaign at the start. They began going for swing voters instead of core Democratic voters, in my view. And they mishandled it at the beginning, and finally they began to get their act together. I think part of this surge is pretty much what Tom said, is that people like the idea of somebody fighting and coming from behind. It may not win the election for him, but I think that's attracting him a lot of votes.
It's a case of missed opportunities. If you look at what Dukakis is talking about in the end days, which he probably should have been talking about more, quail, so forth, if they had packaged these themes and really hit them hard earlier, they may have not had this.
Don't you think, Ken, excuse me.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Don't you think there was a bit of a parochial base in Dukakis' campaign early on? It was Boston-based, it was Harvard-rooted, it had a narrow view of what this country is about, and that with no one in the campaign having experience in running a national campaign, truly a national campaign, it was finally up to Dukakis himself to discover there are 49 other states.
Well, Dukakis made a judgment early on that he was going to go, as John said, for the Reagan Democrats, try to bring them back. He put Benson on the ticket, and those people are precisely the ones that the Bush values issues really neutralized. Benson just didn't help as much as he expected. Quayle didn't hurt as much. They hit him hard on things like capital punishment, raising taxes, all the things that those Reagan Democrats really don't like.
Well, let's talk about the issues. And the fact is, we've heard about abortion, furloughs, etc. We've heard very little about the poor in this country, about the underclass, about the fact that a fifth of American children are at or below the poverty level. And some people would say this is scandalous, that the candidates have not been addressing this.
I would say it's scandalous. They have discovered a homeless man in Washington who lives underneath the steps of the East Front of the United States Capitol and has lived there for 10 years or more. Now, if Congress can't find a solution to that problem when they have a living example in their own building, then how do we expect a candidate to appeal to that segment of the population?
Well, there's the old cynical quote, the poor don't vote. But is that adequate in your view?
No. I don't care whether they vote or don't vote. They're still there, and they're a social problem, and we must deal with it, and neither of these guys has effectively dealt with it. Eric, there are issues this year, but it is, Teddy White used to like to say that there were three determining issues in American presidential elections: rich, poor, black, white, war, peace. Well, we don't have a war-peace issue. We don't really have a killing rich-poor issue, and I don't think we have a black-white issue. So we've descended into kind of a swampland where people are trading promises on fighting drugs and drug kingpins and all of that, when no real issues have been addressed. It's an issueless campaign. Well, in all due respect, John, it seems to me there is a black-white issue and there is a rich-poor issue in this campaign. They're the same, then. You're talking about the underclass and poverty at the bottom. No, and I'm talking about a black-white issue that has been hinted at from time to time, even by Jesse Jackson. And there's been an allegation of racism in the Bush campaign, and there have been elements of cross-racism from the other campaign. But do you think that's a dominant issue in the minds of millions of voters?
But there hasn't really been one dominant issue.
You know, there hasn't been, and I think there's one other thing that the Democrats have to look at when this is over with, and that is whether they still have a party. Because they're going to walk into Congress. They're going to control both houses of Congress when this is over with, unless everybody's mistaken. And the fact is, how many of those congressmen, how many of those members out there who are sitting on fat leads are really busting their humps for Michael Dukakis right now? How many of those senators sitting on 50-point leads are risking 1 or 2 points of those leads to try to pull Michael Dukakis across the line in the final days?
A moment, let's address the congressional and state offices. People saying a lot of low turnout. Will that affect the statewide offices?
Oh, it's hard to tell at this point because, you know, you got to watch a campaign and try to figure out how many governors are squeakers and so forth. But there'll be plenty of time when this is over with to read those tea leaves. And probably it will.
Gentlemen, Maria, our polls are showing that people have been largely dissatisfied with the candidates, the tone of the campaign, the way the issues have been treated. That's a given. We also have the negative campaigning and advertising. Is there a danger that in this criticism, in a way, and some of the jokes that have been made, we may be, that as the country as a whole, may be trivializing this campaign, this election?
Well, I think we've trivialized senatorial and gubernatorial campaigns in the 1980s. Now we're trivializing the presidential campaign. I don't know that you can get it down in America much below about 53% turnout. Do you, Ken? I mean, I think we may have hit bottom already in these contests.
I think a rational American voter could look at the way this campaign's been conducted and reported and say, I'm not going to vote for either one of these guys and go ahead and vote for the rest of the school board ticket and so forth.
It is a true nose-holding contest, as our poll indicates. The high unfavorables for these men indicates that the American public is going to, as John said, read their nose and hold their nose and vote for the one that smells the least.
All I'm saying is that I think we may have hit bottom in this particular 1988 election. There will be an incumbent president running for re-election in '92, we presume. So the ads will not be as bad then against the sitting president as they were this year against no incumbent.
What's the most important lesson that's come out of this campaign for the press and for the candidates?
For me, as I said a couple of weeks ago here, it seems to me that polls, the proliferation of polls, and the fact that reporters have used these polls to color their reporting, to characterize this race as over with throughout most of the fall, that's been a terrible influence, I think, on the quality of this campaign, and I hope we can figure it out and get it changed.
If George Bush does win, as the polls indicate, we say if with a big question mark, what does he have to show in terms of claiming a mandate, to claim that wind in his sails, that he will have the political muscle in Washington to carry through an agenda?
I think George Bush will have to blow in his own sails, because I don't think there's a big mandate out there.
Well, he'd have to bring in a Senate majority of Republicans, and he cannot do that. The Republicans will probably lose 2 seats in the Senate. So we'll wind up with no coattails, no electoral college that indicates anything to Republican hopefuls around the country that they can ride in on Bush's coattails. They're real short.
But we will end up with a new president. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Sure, Maria? I guess so.
So they tell us. And there will be a lot more on the presidential election story on Meet the Press, which follows Sunday Today on most of these stations. Chris Wallace is in Washington with a preview. Chris?
Maria, I'm sure our guests will be very interested in that new NBC poll, which shows Dukakis closing the gap and 1/5 of the electorate still not sure who they will vote for. We'll be talking with Senator Lloyd Bentsen, the Democratic nominee for vice president, and with Robert Teeter, pollster and top strategist for the Bush campaign. 48 hours to Election Day, coming up on Meet the Press. Maria?
Thanks a lot, Chris. And Garrick, you've still got a long day ahead of you.
We have long days, that's right, because we'll be back at 7 this evening Eastern Time, following my nightly newscast, along with Tom Brokaw, John Chancellor, the rest of the NBC News team. A program called Is This Any Way to Elect a President? It's an unconventional look at the campaign. Hope you join us then.
And we will be right back.
In the village of Upper Nyack, the firemen fight fires with ladders and hoses. And a Murata fax machine. It's used to receive floor plans and detailed drawings of buildings so they can plan how to attack the fire before they get to the fire. Murata fax machines.
For generations, it's nourished grandparents, grandchildren, and now their children's children. A breakfast Europeans have enjoyed for centuries, known in America as Kellogg's Mueslix, a natural balance of oats, wheat, rice, corn, barley, raisins, dates, and hazelnuts. Kellogg's Mueslix, 5 grain or bran, what breakfast was meant to be.
This is a test. This station is conducting a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is only a test. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. The broadcasters of your area, in voluntary cooperation with federal, state, and local authorities, have developed this system to keep you informed in the event of an emergency. If this had been an actual emergency, the attention signal you just heard would have been followed by official information, news, or instructions. This station serves the Sacramento area. This concludes this test of the emergency broadcast system.
Well, next week on Sunday Today, we'll take a look at parental ambitions, not for themselves, but for the kids. We'll take a look at how some parents are actually trying to influence their children in the womb. And we'll meet some parents who obsess about the right schools, the right classes, everything from day one on. And then we'll take a look at Prince Charles at 40. Yep, 40. The once and future King of England is turning 40. You might be surprised to know that he's not entirely happy with the hand that life has dealt him. We'll hear about maybe some of his complaints.
We've had a good, interesting, and somewhat serious show, which is appropriate 2 days before Election Day. But to add a little bit of levity and a personal note, this is Maria's birthday. It is Maria's birthday, and we want to have a little present. Don't say, well, it doesn't come in a package.
Are you going to embarrass me? Yeah.
Kyle Good, our director, and the people in our graphic staff have put together a little card for you. There she is. Maria Shriver.
That was a tired day.
And it opens up, and you even have another inside.
Oh.
We're all going to sign this and send it off to you and to Arnold, your husband.
Thank you so
very
much.
Happy birthday.
I'm glad it says November 6, 1988, and not the year I was born.
We are not asking you. You noticed that.
That's right. I'm just a babe. You know how it is. Anyway, we want to thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a great week, and watch all the NBC programs on the election. See you next Sunday. Bye-bye.
Presidential candidates are in